This is going to be part 10 in my series on Python for stock analysis, and you can find links for the earlier videos in the description below, and you can also find a link to the GitHub repository where I am sending all the code that we write. All right, so in part 10 here, what we're going to do is start looking at individual securities. In the first 9 parts, we were looking at entire stock exchanges, or at least large lists of stock symbols that we were interested in. All right, here we're just going to look at single stocks. All right, so to sort of facilitate this a little bit, I went ahead and wrote all the imports that I'm going to be using, right? So I'm going to be using the end-of-day historical data API. I'm going to be using Datetime, Matplotlib, NumPy, Pandas, Seaborn as the default for our graphs or any graphs we generate. All right, and then I set a symbolic constant here, which goes back about a year to get data for whatever security it is we're interested in. All right, and then the way I wrote it, the user is going to be able to change the date, all right, and they're just going to need to put in an ISO formatted date when they do that. Okay, so, and then down below, right, I'm writing an entry function here so that we can test some of the functionality once we have some. All right, so why don't we go ahead and do that? All right, and I'm going to write a class for our stock. All right, and I'll just call it stock. All right, and then the first thing I'm going to want to do is initialize it. All right, I'm going to pass in a couple of parameters. So we'll pass in a symbol, right? I'm going to pass in an API key, right? And then I'll pass in a date, but I'll set it as this default. All right, and then we're going to assume that you may have this data already downloaded and saved somewhere. So I'm going to allow you to point at a folder. All right, and I'll set the default there to be none. All right, so this will work if you want to download data or if you want to use data that you have saved on your computer somewhere. All right, and so then I'll just kind of turn all these into class properties. Okay, and then, so the way I've initialized it, all we really have is a symbol, the API key, which we're not going to do anything with, the API key, which is, private variable, right? I don't want to expose that anywhere, all right? The date, and then possibly a folder, all right? So there's no data associated with this, so that's what I'm going to make next, right? But I'm actually going to write a method called getData to go ahead and go get our data for us. All right, so the work I want to store in other methods than the initializer. All right, so here's that get data. All right, and the first thing we're going to do is maybe assume that, okay, so here's that get data. All right, and then we're going to allow this to work, like I said, whether or not the data has already been downloaded. We're first going to assume that, okay, maybe they've passed in a folder, and let's go see what symbols are available there. And we'll kind of compare it to the symbol that was passed in when the class was initialized. I'm going to use a list comprehension to do this. Okay, and they're all CSV files, so I'm just going to look at everything except for the, the file extension there. Okay, this is getting a little longish. Let me break this down into 2 lines here. And then in the stored folders, if I've done any work there, I'm saving that data out to a file that starts with a 0. All right, so I'm just going to make sure that the file name doesn't start with a 0. Okay, so if this is none, all right, this comprehension will also be none. All right, so we'll just sort of skip by this if we need to. All right, but otherwise, right, we're going to go ahead and check and see if the symbol is in there. Okay, and if it's in there, we're going to go ahead and read it. Okay, and we'll just put the CSV back on the end there. A couple other things, right? We're going to set the index here. All right, and then I'm going to round it. All right, sometimes these files come back with way more precision than we need. All right, so I'm just going to sort of standardize it to a 2 decimal US currency. All right, so if we don't have a symbol in that available data, then we're going to have to go get it. All right, and so here I'm going to use the end-of-day historical data API, and I'm going to initialize a client. All right, pass in that API key, And then, yeah, we're going to get the data again. This time we can go directly to a data frame. Okay, and once again, I'll just go ahead and round that. All right, I'm going to change the index when we download the data. All right, when you get data from End of Day Historical, you get an integer-based index, and I want the date, so I'll just go ahead and reset that. Okay, and then I'll get rid of this extra date column. Okay, and then with all that done, I'm just going to return the data. All right, and so now when we initialize a stock instance here, in addition to the 3 or 4 instance variables we have, we're also going to have this data stored in there. All right, so let's see if I can do that without making any mistakes. And down here, I'm going to just write a test. All right, we'll start a stock. All right, and then I'll pass in the symbol. All right, and we'll get something that we don't have. And I'm going to have to write a variable for this API key. Okay, and then I guess we'll print that off. Okay, and then we'll print that off. Okay, let's try that. Okay. Let's try it one more time. Okay, so there we have it. At least we have our stock initialized here, and we have data in there. Okay, so I'm going to stop there for part 10. Part 11, we're going to go ahead and add some more data transformations into our stock class. So hope to see you there.